in a choice like will there or won't there be a nuclear war, if you ask me, I may tell you what I think. It doesn't mean that it's true, or it doesn't mean that it points to the destiny. It's just what I think. And whether it reassures you or not, I can't, there's not much I can do about that. I mean, I can say to you, well, Dan, don't worry because, but the expression is, I'm just shining you on because you're worried about it. I'm telling you not to worry about it. But, I mean, I grew up, my entire life growing up was spent in the Cold War with the idea that nuclear war was imminent. And I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we didn't have cable news coverage then, so you had to run into the living room when there was a special announcement, and and get that, and otherwise, until the next special announcement or regularly scheduled program, you had no idea what was going on, and you thought, well, in the meantime, we'll just listen for the air raid signals, as though
they're going to do any good,
as though that we're going to do something. Right. And I remember too, in elementary school, air raid drills, as though they would do something.
Yeah.
And that was just life.
Well,
I was just going to say, so now we're perhaps turning back in that direction.
Well,
that's enough.
Okay. I don't want to get too into the weeds about nuclear war. I just picked that out of my hat because this was something that, I mean, it's what people are talking about. But
yeah, I'm not really talking about the war itself. I'm talking about choices and the way we think about things. And
right. So that is a good comparison between, is Putin going to order his generals to launch the missiles? Is the global temperature going to climb to the point where human civilization is impossible? Is there going to be another pandemic? Am I going to die? And the answer to that one is definitely yes. And it's completely outside of my control, as are all the other things. And so, yes, you can make choices in relation to these things, but you shouldn't pretend that you're going to solve these problems.
No, that's what those choices aren't about. That those choices are about the narratives we run for ourselves.
Right. So that was the direction I was going to. So you have to choose how you're going to look at this stuff, and what it's going to mean for you. And I think that if you're stuck in a worldview that doesn't allow unknown things to happen, if you believe that you understand what's going on, then it's impossible for you to choose a story that helps you, that keeps you going. And
wait a minute, say that again.
I think that okay, no, I'll try it again. If you think that the facts are all that matter, and that you have the facts, and maybe someone can tell you something. Did you know that Putin actually doesn't have thumbs, so he can't turn the keys to launch the missiles? Maybe that would reassure you. But aside from those sorts of facts, There is no fact that you can acquire that will relieve you, that will allow you to go on with your life happily. And happily isn't the right word. Just go on with your life. I think that what happened to me was when I went through all this is that I lost the ability to. I lost my naivety. I couldn't believe that everything was going to be okay by default. I had to construct a story that everything would be okay. And without that, the other things I could do is either just sort of close my eyes and go through my routine and try to distract myself as much as possible, or else fall apart and sink into a depression that would leave.
I'm curious
everyone else
about
bereft.
something. Yeah, I'm curious about something. I never had the experience of thinking that everything was going to be all right.
Mhm.
I mean, perhaps when I was a little child, I had that kind of thought. But after that, at some point when a relative dies or, something happens, I had an uncle who, when I was probably 10 or 12, he died at home from brain cancer. And we visited him every other day, and I watched him die, and I thought, so I never thought that everything was going to be okay. And but I also never, if okay was to mean that I wouldn't die, or that my parents wouldn't die, or that that death was not walking up and down the street, if I don't think I ever thought that after a certain point in adolescence. And then growing up when the violence of civil rights was commonplace, I lost several friends in the civil rights movement. And then the Vietnam War came, and a lot of us were involved in that, and so that was, and also growing up, being born at the end of the Second World War, and living through the aftermath of Stalin, and the awareness of the Gulag, and the awareness of the Nuremberg trials, and then I do remember more consciously the Adolf Eichmann trial, and these things. It just was absolutely clear to me that everything was not going to be all right for everybody. And I'm just wondering how those big global events affected your worldview.
I don't think the global events make a difference, because I can look at you and talk to you, and I know that you have seen the angel of death the way that I have. And there are a few other people who I know have done it, but most people don't. And it doesn't matter. Some of them are old. Some of them have lived through the same world events. I remember my grandfather, who was he never fought. He never saw action in World War II. He lied about his age to get into the army. And as soon as he was out of boot camp, the war was over. So he was only an occupier in Tokyo. But as like he must have been 18 or possibly even 17 at the time. But he knew what he was talking about. He'd seen the angel of death. And I've known some other people who I didn't realize it at the time, but now looking back, I know that they had too. But other people just don't. Other people watch the
I'm
news.
not, I'm not, I'm not really talking about other people. I'm asking about your
Well,
perspective, how
but I'm
that,
attacking your premise. I'm saying that my exposure to world events can't have made a difference because I see it hasn't made a difference to anybody else.
but it can have made a difference because you're an individual, you're different than everybody else. I mean, world events impacted me before I ever saw their reality, but just
Yeah.
as narratives, they horrified me. The Holocaust was a nightmare, and its images were on television
Yeah.
uh, and in books. I remember seeing, Auschwitz photographs in a book in the library on World War II or something.
Yeah. For me
And
in school.
and so naked bodies in piles, and then leaving the library and walking down the street where the humidor was open, and so was the haberdasher, and all of these other things were going on, and then some of my neighbors were Holocaust survivors.
Yeah.
And gradually you became aware that was a thing that they could speak to. And knowing that changed my worldview when I was very, very young. Just knowing that Mr. Lukacher was in one of those camps.
Yeah.
That he lost all of his family in one of those camps. Just knowing that made it real for me.
Yeah.
In the sense that not real like the touch of a cloth, but real in the sense of, oh, this happens. And outcomes can be terrible for people.
I think that you can swim in the sea of knowledge and not get wet. I think that was my situation. So, I mean, I didn't need to go to neighbors. My grandmother, not the wife of the grandfather who went to Japan, but my father's mother, escaped from the Nazis and hid in a chicken coop, so the story goes. And there were some darker parts to the story that my parents didn't tell me. But she made it out alive, and she met my grandfather, but she didn't talk about that to me. And so it could be that I was just sheltered, but nobody talked about this sort of thing to me. But I think it's more than other people. I think it's me. I grew up with a sort of barrier between myself and the rest of the world, saying, I can read about terrible things, and I can even hear people tell me about terrible things that have happened to them, but I can read science fiction, and terrible things happen in science fiction too. And it's all out there. It's not in here. I don't need to worry about it the way that things that affect me worry me. And I had that sort of protective shell until I got sick. So my choice after I got sick was, should I put this shell back together? I can't. That wouldn't be right. But I can't just sit out here bathing in the horror. I have to be able to live in this world and do the right thing in this world, and make my peace with it. I have to believe that something good will come of it.